maintain their balance, to use rhythm, to make sense of and find logic in rather complicated sequences. So thinking about those strategies, Oli thought, well, maybe that would be something that would be very useful for people with Parkinson's, but at the same time, because it's a dance class, because it would be fun and social, it wouldn't have anything to do with Parkinson's. So it's kind of two sides of a coin. And we always like to say that the class has nothing to do with Parkinson's. It's a dance class, a rigorous dance class that focuses on the aesthetic and creative elements of dance. But because of the way that dancers train and because of the way that dance has developed around the world in a variety of techniques, whether it's ballet or katak or hula, whatever technique you're using, there are sets of principles that are extremely useful for people with movement disorder, particularly Parkinson's. So she approached the Mark Morris Dance Group, which had just opened a new dance center in Brooklyn, and was really looking for ways to connect with the community that it hadn't had the opportunity to do so when it was only working out of a 3-room office. So these two things kind of came together, and the company trained the body to do complicated things. For dancers, we really are talking about dealing with various techniques or dealing with choreography that's thrown at us, and we have to try to figure out how to make it work in our own bodies. For people with Parkinson's, that challenge is not necessarily choreography. That challenge is actually everyday movement, which becomes less and less automatic. So for those of us without Parkinson's, walking down the street or things like getting out of a car, we do it automatically. We don't really think about it. With Parkinson's, those everyday actions become more challenging, and you have to apply more and more focused intent in order to make the connections necessary, the physical connections, to do those movements. So in essence, that process is very similar to thinking about dance movement in a way that it starts to become automatic, or thinking about choreography in a way that it starts to become embodied. And that's really the essence. We try very hard not to make the class a therapy class. We are not trained therapists. We don't have a degree in dance movement therapy. There are people who do. We really treat the class and we treat the participants as dancers. And
further about the benefits of dance for people with Parkinson's disease, and how else is the program's impact measured?
Great question. We measure in a couple different ways. There have been some preliminary studies that have been done in class, and these studies have looked at both motor and non-motor changes. So things like gait and tremor and balance, these things have been studied. There have been some significant improvements in those elements, which are tested using a standard Parkinson's disease rating scale. But we've also looked specifically at quality of life issues, and I said a few minutes ago that Parkinson's is a movement disorder, but it's also a quality of life disorder, that these things start, the movement elements of Parkinson's and some of the psychological issues pertaining to depression and cognitive impairment start to affect people's daily lives. And so we've done a number of preliminary studies that look at how the class impacts people's quality of life. What we've seen over time is that the class improves people's confidence. It improves their short-term mobility. It has a tendency to change and transform their relationships with care partners, with their loved ones, with families, in how each person thinks about the other. It's transformed the way that people think about living with a chronic disease. So instead of being trapped by it, instead of feeling that you are in a world of limits, you start to understand that there are increasing possibilities. So our task, or the task of researchers, is to try to delineate these changes in a way that they can be understood, analyzed, and validated, and then respected by the medical community. I mean, I think it's very difficult to measure something as complicated as dance with tools that are as sort of rudimentary as these very basic scientific measures. We really don't have a good way of measuring something as multifocal as dance. And so we tend to take pieces of it, and from those pieces sketch together a picture of what we think is beneficial. But I think the big things so far are confidence, on the quality of life side, confidence, activities of daily living. People in our Manhattan and Brooklyn classes reported that they had an easier time with at least one activity of daily life. That could be cooking, it could be walking down the street, it could be picking things up off the floor, whatever that activity is, that the class actually helped them do that better. And on the motor side, we've seen improvement in facial expression, tremor, and gait, as well as short-term mobility. The other thing the class does is it really transforms people's identities in a way that they see themselves very differently as a result of the class. One woman in the class in London said she really appreciated the way the class made her feel lovely again. It's not a very scientific term, the term lovely, but anyone with Parkinson's or with a movement disorder, hearing that word, it has a very strong resonance, because with Parkinson's, you feel very unlovely. You feel clumsy. You feel like your state, excuse me, your state of natural grace and rhythm has gone away. You don't feel beautiful anymore. And so to come back to a state of feeling lovely in your movement is a rather significant change. And what we need to try to do as a dance community is help scientists and especially neurologists understand that that has meaning and significance in people's daily life, that actually is, for some people, as important as the exact centimeter width of their gait, which tends to be what's measured. There's also, I don't know if this will be the last thing, there's also been an impact on dance companies and dancers and people who've been involved with the program. I think it's changed, I know Erica Rose and I have talked about this and feel very strongly about this, that it's changed the way we feel about how dance can impact communities, about the role that dancers have in our local, national, international communities, and really about the service that we can provide as part of our performing lives, after our performing lives. So I think traditionally in teaching, we've looked at people under 18. You know, how can dance companies really reach out to the next generation of dancers, ticket buyer audiences? But there's a whole generation of people who really can receive the benefits of dancing and are currently underserved by dance organizations. So wherever the Dance4PD program has sprouted, we've seen a change in those organizations and how they think about communities, how they think about the demographics of the communities they're serving, and how they can deepen their missions to provide high-quality dance experiences for people living right near them. A lot of work even before the May training workshops that we did. How did you first make those contacts, and what sort of path did you take to try to explore possibilities?
Well, I came to Australia actually as a Rotary World Peace Fellow to do my master's in peace and conflict studies. And one of the things that I find is that you have to wear sort of an activist hat in some ways, as far as good old grassroots networking and getting out there and meeting people and making connections. So when I first arrived, I connected with the state Parkinson's support organizations, and then we put in a proposal to do a presentation at the National Parkinson's Conference last year in Brisbane, and so was able to share information, do some classes there, and then people began to contact me and us from that conference at that point. But a lot of meeting people, going to support groups, showing videos, and just talking to people and trying to share what is such a joyful program, I find. And also, just as I've developed connections through the community, really tapping into the dance organizations and the Parkinson's organizations, because it takes both to make this program run.
Human disease, so we're running a bit late, as you do with diseases, sorry about that. But can we just have a round of applause again, because that was just